Welcome to a special series called The Global Crisis Monitor, featured on the Treasury Update podcast. Thank you for joining. Series host Meredith Zonsius checks in with Alexa Cook and Craig Jeffery of Strategic Treasurer on the 6 weeks results from the COVID-19 Impact and Response Survey. These new results cover the new shifts on economic and health issues, what's happening with finance projects involving tech firms and banks, the mindset on liquidity positions, and more. Listen in to this brief discussion as Treasury and finance professionals weigh in during these shifting times. We are now 6 weeks into the weekly Global Crisis Monitor. Let's start off with the top headlines.
Yeah, I'll begin. This is a week of repeats. There's two key elements that had positive trends, and it's the second week in a row after a lot of weeks of negativity. The view of the organization's health, that improved again. It's the second time it improved noticeably. It moved into positive territory, even to a greater extent than last week. Second, the view on the organization's liquidity also improved, and that had deteriorated week over week for the first 4 weeks. This is the second week it moved positive. And just to do a couple of those numbers, little over 30% viewed it more positively versus 15.7% more negatively on a week over week basis. So almost a 15% improvement. Second element after the two peats is economic improvements. The 3-month outlook and the 12-month outlook both improved. They were less negative and more positive, respectively. So the 3 months still was in the negative territory, but it's moved up over 4, whereas 5 would be stasis. So it's always been sitting below 3. It's moved up over 4. And the 12-month moved into more positive territory. So less negative in the short term and more positive in the 12-month period. Alexa?
Yeah, I can add that we've had a major negative shift on the health outlook. So the extension of time until COVID-19 becomes a minor health issue has doubled to about 10 months after sitting at 5 months for the last 2 weeks. The inflection point is at less than a month, and that stayed the same. We had a few new survey questions on projects included in this week's monitor. The news is a bit mixed, but better than what we had thought.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something too on the negative shift in the health outlook. So we're 6 weeks in. The movements in these 3 categories where we look at time and we come up with what's the median viewpoint for the inflection point when COVID-19 no longer becomes a significant health issue, and then the overall economic consistency, returning to a state of normalcy. They've all moved pretty slowly, with one exception perhaps. The financial normalcy had continued to move out. But the health issues had stayed very consistent. This was a massive shift in that area in terms of thinking that it's not going to be a minor issue now for quite a while.
Interesting. Let's get into the new statistics. What has been happening with finance projects?
Yeah, so this is that new set of questions that Alexa had mentioned. We asked about what's going on with projects that involve tech firms and banks, to see if there's people are mothballing projects or canceling them, or if there's a new groundswell of new projects. And so I'll just go through a couple of them. More than 9% of organizations started a project. That's about 1 in 11 firms, almost exactly 1 in 11 firms started a new project. What about altering scope or the pace of projects? That was a little over 30%. So 3 in 10 altered scope. And there's some interesting information when you dig down into that, because there's a couple other questions. 1 in 5, or about 20% of those, expanded the scope of projects. 1 in 6 reduced scope. So more expanded the scope of projects than reduced the scope. That's not necessarily what I would have thought. And then more than 60% did reprioritization, pushing some things forward, moving some things back. Now back up to the top level, how many paused a project? That was less positive. There was 33% paused a project. Other priorities was near 40%. Budget cash flow was a little bit over a quarter of those reasons for pausing a project. Staffing issues made up about 1 in 7. Now, canceling projects outright was less than 4%, though budget, other priorities, or staffing caused projects to be canceled. And only another 7.5% are considering a change. That could be delaying or speeding up, expanding or canceling, and reducing scope. So this was a lot more positive than I thought it would be, given that more are expanding scope than reducing scope. But the dark cloud is, 33% had paused, and we'll see if these pick up again once we start to move towards financial normalcy, or if those projects may move to the cancel category.
That's interesting, Craig. As a result of the numbers from this week's monitor, how are people feeling about their organization's outlook on liquidity positions?
So this is our second week of improvement on this, and it's giving us some cautious optimism that things could be changing. If we go another 3 to 4 weeks in a row, we'll let our pessimism subside a bit. And we still have the two top concerns, and those are the first being direct financial impact to the business, and the second is the access to the adequate liquidity.
Each week I ask you about the AR and AP. Are there any changes on the negative outlooks here?
No, so AR is still quite negative, very pessimistic. It's still sitting at about 7 to 8 times negative, which is about where it was last week. So no changes to the negative outlooks there.
So before we break for the week, what are some things that we should be looking out for?
I can start that off. So we've added a few new questions again, and we'll move a few off of the table to just keep the survey at about 5 minutes that you can take each week.
Yeah, we'll be looking too just to see our jobless numbers going to spook the respondents in finance for this survey. Is that going to create some feedback loop? We won't be able to tell from the survey itself, but that's certainly weighing on the minds of Treasury people.
Yeah, and another one is, will the long-term concern about the health stay elevated, or are we learning enough to know?
And finally, Meredith, will the two-peat or the repeat of positivity continue into a real trend that gets established, or is that going to fluctuate and bump back down? Those are the things we're looking at.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing these insightful results, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you again next week.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you.
We wanted to encourage you to take the Global Crisis Monitor survey repeatedly while it's live. It runs from Wednesday to Tuesday every week. You can go to treasurycoalition.com and follow the links. Add your voice and insight so that as a profession, we can take positive and knowledgeable steps to move our organizations and nations forward. Invest 5 minutes each week at treasurycoalition.com and get great information and insights while helping our profession and organizations.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.